Welcome to the World Series of Fighting Post-Fight Show. I am your co-host, John Franklin from Combat Press. I am joined this week to discuss all the relevant action from World Series of Fighting 30 by Nicholas Peralta of MMA Outsiders and the MMA Discussion Podcast. Nick, how you doing?
I'm doing good, John.
I'm doing good. So, all right, let's get going with this. We'll start with the main event. Two-weight title holder David Branch was defending his middleweight belt against Clifford Starks. The fight went the distance, 49-44 on all cards. Branch retains the middleweight title, the one hiccup there being the illegal knee. I believe it was in the second. Let's go ahead and talk to me about David Branch and what you saw in his performance.
Well, I mean, he fought a spectacular fight. I mean, he used his physical attributes to his benefit in the fight. You know, he was the longer, taller, rangier guy, and you know, whenever he was on the outside, he knew it. He was able to utilize his head movement well enough to get out of the way of any shots that Starks would throw at him, especially over the top. That seemed to be Starks' go-to on the feet. It's certainly throughout the fight, it was certainly something that Branch caught on to, and it didn't seem to change on Starks' hand when it came to, you know, his boxing. When it came to throwing that overhand, it was a mainstay technique that Starks decided to stick with the entire fight, and Branch, you know, by round two, I would say, caught on to it and was able to stay out of too much danger throughout the majority of the fight. And the most surprising thing about it was that he was actually able to out-grapple Clifford Starks, who is an NCAA Division I wrestler who has a background in you know, high-level wrestling, and Branch is not so much has done high school wrestling, which is the most surprising part. He is, of course, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt under Renzo Gracie, and but you know, of course, in jiu-jitsu, takedowns aren't the strongest suit for many jiu-jitsu practitioners. But that did not deter David from getting multiple takedowns throughout all 25 minutes. And yeah, other than the illegal knee in the second round that docked him a point, you know, the scorecards were exactly how I had it, 49-45, and you know, it was a huge dominant win over a very credible opponent in Clifford Starks. So, you know, I thought that was a spectacular fight on David's part, probably one of his most impressive of his career.
Absolutely, I thought he looked great as well. He fought Clifford Starks' fight and still won. We'll get to what's next for David Branch here as we go along the lines, because his next opponent may have been on this very same card. We move on now to John Fitch and Joao Zeffirino. Fitch won it by unanimous decision, clean sweep, 50-45s all the way around. He wins the vacant welterweight title. It's his first title of his career. So for me, early on, I thought Joao Zeffirino looked a little sharp. He was defending takedowns well, and then Fitch just sort of did what John Fitch does. Talk about John Fitch and Joao Zeffirino.
Well, I mean, Joao didn't go down without a fight, and I mean, he knew where his strengths were, and of course, whenever he hit the mat, he definitely tried to stay dangerous on the mat, where John Fitch, of course, wanted him as well, but he obviously needed to stay wary of Joao's submission skills, most specifically his leg locks. And you know, Joao almost had one, I believe, in the second round where he almost got Fitch, and then another one in the third. There were quite a few. I believe 3 attempts overall from Joao that you could contend as close or as attempts. But Fitch, man, I mean, the guy does what he does, and he's amazing at being able to just keep the pace going at his optimal level where he wants it to be. He never fights at his opponent's pace. He never wants to allow that. And that's just something that he's always been so great at. It's still something he's fantastic at. When it comes to coming forward, he's always coming forward. It doesn't matter if, you know, and I actually said this about Joao at the beginning of the fight, the first round. Joao was actually landing some good counters, you know, going back, and Fitch that continued coming forward, and he kept landing some jabs, and he was actually catching him coming in a few times. Just couldn't land anything too significant to really deter Fitch from wanting to continue coming forward. Or think twice about ever changing levels and going for that takedown. So, I mean, Joao just did not have the weapons to keep Fitch from doing what he does best, which is coming forward, his pace, his style, with his wrestling and grappling, and his level of control whenever he's got a man down. And it was definitely one of the best wins for Fitch as well, because obviously what was at stake, a welterweight championship, and it looks good on him, I gotta say, and he was definitely a happy camper after the fight.
He was, and moving forward, it seems like Jake Shields is the next guy. So you know, it seems like contract negotiations are getting better with the World Series of Fighting and Jake Shields. That was the fight we thought we were getting originally. Like you said, this title allows Fitch to continue doing some of the advocacy work. He does. He believes that it'll bring him a larger platform. Some disagree. I happen to agree with him. So hopefully that John Fitch is able to do the kind of work post for the rest of his career and also post-career based on having won this belt. All right, next up, Vinny Magalhães versus Jake Hewen. This is a lot closer of a fight than I thought it was going to be. It's 29-28 times 3 for Vinny Magalhães. He gets the unanimous decision. I thought Jake, it was more of a stand-up fight than I thought it was going to be, and Vinny held his own with some leg kicks, and it was he couldn't quite find what he was looking for on the ground. Jake defended well. The fight actually ended in an odd way with just Hewen just bashing Vinny's ribcage, begging the ref to stop it. That was never going to happen. But talk about Vinny Magalhães and Jake Hewen.
I mean, that was a wild fight, and round 1 of that fight, I had never seen Vinny throw so many kicks in one round ever. That was the most amount of kicks I've ever seen. I think he's ever thrown in a fight in his career. I think that he felt comfortable throwing the kicks because I think he knew Jake didn't want to take him down. That wasn't something that I'm sure was in Jake's game plan. So I think he felt comfortable throwing all these kicks. And of course, Vinny being a masterclass grappler when it comes to MMA jiu-jitsu. I'm sure that throwing kicks was something he knew that no matter what, it just benefits him because he can either catch it and take him down, or it's gonna land and it's gonna hurt. Because those kicks, the majority of them sounded like just ouch.
Yeah.
Definitely wouldn't want to get hit with any of those. And of course, as the fight progressed, Jake actually held his own on the feet more as the fight continued. He started to find his range and started to land some punches on Vinny in the second round. And then in the third round, when it finally did hit the mat, Vinny actually came extraordinarily close to a Kimura. I mean, as close as you can get. And Jake, one of the smallest adjustments he needed to make, but the most important and probably the hardest thing to do when somebody is putting you in a Kimura lock off of their back is trying to pass. Generally, a jiu-jitsu practitioner will have the guard locked, and that's the position that they were in. Vinny had him in his guard, his legs locked, and was trying to get that arm. And so, generally, when you're in that position, it's almost impossible, especially when you're when you're going against a black belt like Vinny is. To pass, and that's one of the most important things you can do. Pass on the side of the arm that's getting torqued like that, and that's the best way to get out of it. Amazingly, Jake was able to actually do that, get out of the submission, threatened with a Kimura himself to put himself in even more advantageous position, which was in the position where he just started digging elbows into the ribcage of Vinny Magalhães, and it was at the last few seconds of the round, and he just kept bashing him. And yeah, you're right, he was begging the referee Kim Winslow to stop the fight, but it was a good call. You can't really stop a fight in that position, I don't think, especially when Vinny doesn't look like he's out. He's not tapping at all. He's in a position where, a finish is probably not going to happen unless the fighter himself says enough is enough.
All right, so I'll kind of loop in the, and again, I agree with all the things you just said. Vinny Magalhães is probably next going to contend with David Branch, 205 pounds.
I agree.
Branch says he only has a few fights left at 205 pounds, and he wants to just vacate the belt and move back to 85 full time. Vinny Magalhães.
I was surprised by that.
Yeah, Vinny Magalhães is probably going to be the next fight, so we'll see. All right, I'm gonna group in a bunch of these fights together, just talk about them real quick, and then I have a little bit of a way I want to end. So I'll just talk about these 3 fights real quick, just for housekeeping purposes. I'll do it on my own, and then we'll talk about the other ones. Abu Azaitar defeated Danny Davis by unanimous decision, 29-28 all around. A little bit of controversy in that. Rex Harris defeated Clinton Williams by unanimous decision, 29-28, 29-28, 30-27. Obviously,
30-27,
which was surprising. The entire it seemed like everybody thought Clinton Williams was going to win. That was a surprise. And then finally, Zach Bonnell defeated Jeff Roman by split decision, 29-28, 28-29, 30-27. So all these had a little bit of controversy to them as far as the judges go. But hey, you leave it in the hands of the judges, that's what happens. So here's what I want to get to next. I'm going to do this like the UFC would do it because of the fortunateness of the way the card fell. So I'm going to talk about the remaining 3 fights in this way. Abu Bakar Nurmagomedov defeated Matt Frinsu by TKO, strikes round 2, 305 of it. I'm going to go ahead and give him performance of the night. Steve Cazzola defeated Matt Church by TKO, strikes round 1. I'm going to go ahead and give him knockout of the night. Adam Acquaviva defeated Andreas Ponce by submission, rear naked choke, round 1, 210 of it. I'm going to give him submission of the night. So if we were doing performance bonuses, and this is in no way to put the pressure on the World Series of Fighting to do that, that's how I think these three guys fell. Go ahead and start with Nurmagomedov and talk about the performances.
I mean, man, he had the pitch perfect performance of the night. Definitely, probably well deserved. If the World Series of Fighting did that and he didn't get one, that'd be madness. Because I mean, the guy looked like an animal in there. I mean, he couldn't have fought that fight any perfectly. I mean, of course, we all know him as this master sambo fighter. And we expected, a grappling clinic on his part, but that's not what we saw. I mean, we saw him utilize such effective counter-striking. I mean, he had his feet planted. He wasn't moving too much. I mean, as far as footwork goes, I mean, his head movement was kind of there, but I mean, he was almost kind of baiting his opponent to come in, and by being so stationary almost, and that allowed him to find some great shots. He was peppering him with that jab as well, and like I said, whenever his opponent came in, he was able to counter correctly and just put on a nice little one-round striking clinic. And then, of course, it eventually led to level changes, which, again, he did perfectly and was able to get him to the mat. And sure enough, just, dominated that fight from there, because that's where he's actually best. So, I mean, despite showing a striking advantage in this fight, he was still able to take it to where we expected him to, and delivered that masterclass grappling that we expected to see from him, and finish the fight from there. I mean, that was a fantastic fight, and him at welterweight, when they've signed new fighters like Colton Smith and John Howard, and that division is of course very exciting. Now John Fitch as the champ, and you got Jake Shields in there. I mean, that division is just looking fun all of a sudden, and now with the addition of Nurmagomedov, I can't wait to see what goes next on for him.
Absolutely, he looked fantastic. We'll move on to Steve Cazzola. 7 fights in his career, 7 finishes. He defeats Matt Church again. That's our knockout of the night.
Yeah.
First round, went in there and just cleaned out Church.
I mean, that right hand was there all day. I mean, he landed that right hand a mean 3 times prior to landing that closer right hand. The fourth one that landed 4 times the charm, and he just dropped his opponent. And the second he was on his back, I mean, he did not show any mercy. He went for the kill and showed great finishing instincts, and 7 finishes, 7-0. I mean, that's somebody to definitely look into. When that's an up-and-coming star right there.
Coming off of a knee injury, Adam Acquaviva defeated Andreas Ponce by submission, got his back, and just ripped that rear naked choke. Again, first round as well, 210 into it. What'd you see in Acquaviva?
I mean, prior to this fight, I mean, he had a mixed record when it came to finishes, and so I mean, we didn't really know too much of what to expect. We hadn't seen much of this fighter before, but I mean, he showed well-roundedness. I believe in that fight, and then sure enough on the mat, I mean, he showed patience more than anything, because as the fight progressed, he needed to work dominantly from the positions that he was, and either finish the fight from there or transition, and he decided to transition until he found an obvious spot to try and finish the fight, and once he was there, he was able to do that. So again, and that's another example of a guy who could definitely be coming up in the World Series of Fighting if he continues to look that successful.
Absolutely, it was a good night of fights. There was some criticism about the ratings. The ratings were low. Part of that has to do with the NCAA Final Four going on, the late start. Let's go ahead and I'll run down real quick just for housekeeping, and then we'll get out of here. The salaries. So it was David Branch, top earner of the night, $130,000.
He got paid.
$65,000 win bonus. John Fitch, 35 to show, 35 to win. He won obviously, 70 grand for him. Starks and Zeffirino made 15 grand. Jake Hewen, Vinny made 14 grand. Jake Hewen 10. Abu Azatar 6. Nurmagomedov 7. And then the other guys are 3,000s, 4,000s in there. Nothing too that jumps out at you. The criticism also was Jeff Rowan made 500 for his performance. So the thing that upsets me about the salaries in that way is that, conveniently people seem to go in and out of whether or not they feel that the World Series of Fighting is a high-level organization. When they don't pay people enough, they say they're a high-level organization, but then when they're not pleased with the fights, they say they're a low-level organization. It's just a convenient argument for whatever argument they seem to be making when it comes to the World Series of Fighting. I thought it was a good card. Just go ahead and put a period on this card and tell me your lasting thoughts leaving this card.
Well, I mean, just a quick check on the payment. You know, I mean, like, look at David Branch. He was never making that kind of money in the UFC. He wasn't making that money at Titan FC. He wasn't making that money anywhere before. And look at that. I mean, he got paid some decent money for defending his title in a well-earned decision victory. And look at Justin Gaethje. That's another guy who made. I mean, the World Series of Fighting. What I love about them is they have this platform where it's big, and I mean it's on NBC Sports, and that's a big deal. And there's fighters on in this promotion that if they started out, you know, looking hot, like Justin Gaethje, who started from the very beginning, like World Series of Fighting 2, I believe, and now, you know, of course, here he is, just past World Series of Fighting 29, just defended his title against Brian Foster. He got paid very well. I mean, the opportunity is there, and that's the key word, opportunity. I mean, Dana White from the UFC has made a very big, statement in saying that, you know, you have an opportunity here to, you know, make as much money as possible, and if you're in the limelight, if you're a guy that people want to watch, you will get paid. I mean, look at David Branch. That's some money that he made. Gaethje makes some money, and nobody knew who he was 3 years ago, and now look where he's at now. He's undefeated. He's this great champion. He's definitely earned his fortune at this point. And, you know, I mean, I believe that these fighters that we just talked about on this card, they're capable of getting to that point and capable of getting to the top of the World Series of Fighting's divisions, whatever divisions that they're fighting for. And should they be able to do that, they'll make this kind of money as well, I believe. And so, you know, I mean, you're right. I mean, but at the same time, you know, you look at the money that the World Series of Fighting is putting out, it's still better than a lot of what these other promotions put out. I mean, unless you're on the top of the bill, you're not getting paid any much differently than what the World Series of Fighting was putting out. The biggest difference is the World Series of Fighting has a much bigger platform than, say, Access TV or any of these UFC Fight Pass promotions, you know? So, you know, I mean, I just hope that as many guys as we're seeing from the World Series of Fighting continue to look this good, continue to look this successful, and the money will come eventually, as long as they continue to be, you know, as long as they put in the work and continue the successful trail that we saw a glimmer of in this event this past Saturday.
Absolutely. Well, there you have it. That's all the relevant information that you need from the World Series of Fighting 30. We put a bow on it. We handed it right to you as a gift. So that's it for this one. We'll try and do as many of these as we can post-fight. We're going to try and do one every time out. Again, in the end, this was a good card. You know, you would have, yeah, the young guys,
Definitely.
the prospects took care of the finishes, and the more, you know, developed, established fighters took care of the name recognition and the unanimous decisions at the top. All right, so that's it. For me, John Franklin of Combat Press, and for Nick Peralta of MMA Outsiders, that's it for this World Series of Fighting post-fight show. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.